When I came back to my childhood home in the countryside after a 4-month absence to assist my aging parents, I was stunned to find my daughter, Alison, alone in the dark bathroom. Her once long, cherished hair lay in clumps on the floor, her clothes clinging to her soaked, slender frame. In shock, I shook her gently by the shoulders and asked, "Alison, are you all right? What on earth happened?" It took her a moment to recognize me. When she did, relief washed over her face and she burst into tears. I noticed her hair was not only crudely chopped with scissors, but also partly shaved with clippers. My heart sank. Alison was supposed to be getting married soon. As I embraced her, she began to reveal her ordeal bit by bit. "Grace and Dad hit me," she confessed. I had sensed something was off, but the reality that my husband had turned against her was a gut-wrenching betrayal. He had told Alison he would be gone for 5 days and insisted she call off her engagement before his return, a calculated attempt to sabotage her happiness. Outraged, I called him to confront him. Calmly, he informed me they were at the airport, heading to Hokkaido for a trip. His indifference in the face of what he had orchestrated was chilling. "We're about to board, so if it's anything urgent, email me," he said casually, ending the call. At that moment, my love and trust in him shattered. I whispered to Alison, "This house holds many memories of your father and our family, but it might be time to let go." She nodded in agreement. I couldn't forgive the harm they had done to her. Determined, I began planning our next steps to seek justice, and together, we left that house of pain behind. I'm Sophia, 49 years old, part of a family of 4 that includes my husband and our 2 daughters. Grace, the elder, got married 7 years ago and moved away. Our family may seem typical from the outside, but as a blended family, we face unique challenges. After losing my first husband in a tragic accident when I was 25, I was overwhelmed by grief. During his wake, my mother's stern words snapped me out of it. "Sophia, stay strong. You're a mother." Her reminder fueled a newfound resolve within me. From that moment, I knew my purpose was to protect Alison, no matter what. Despite my mother's concerns, I chose not to return to my parents' home. This house, passed down to me, symbolizes my resilience and the unbreakable bond between Alison and me. As we face these new trials, my resolve only strengthens. I will safeguard my daughter and our future with every ounce of my being. After my husband passed, the house where we had lived together, purchased shortly after our wedding, became an anchor, its mortgage to be settled by his life insurance. My mother, respecting my decision to stay, supported me from her countryside home for about 7 months. Her support helped me regain my footing faster than I'd anticipated. During this period of adjustment, I met Charles, my future husband, at my first part-time job, as a single mother. The small company had a close-knit, family-like atmosphere, which made it easier to bond with my colleagues. Charles, a single father raising his daughter, quickly became a friend. His daughter, Grace, with her curly hair and infectious smile, reminded me of the challenges of parenting alone, especially as he shared his struggles understanding the emotional needs of his girl. Our friendship deepened as we supported each other through parenting challenges. We started spending more time together, taking our daughters on outings like shopping trips and aquarium visits. Seeing our children bond and support each other, our relationship naturally progressed into something more. After a year, Charles proposed. He was understanding of my past and promised to cherish those memories with me. With Alison and Grace getting along so well, I felt confident in moving forward. We soon married and decided to continue living in my previous home, which brought mixed feelings due to its association with my late husband. However, Charles, sensitive to my emotions, made a heartfelt declaration by the small Buddhist altar of my late husband, reassuring me of our new beginning together. Living together brought joy and new dynamics to our family structure. Alison, much younger than Grace, looked up to her as a big sister and followed her everywhere. Although their age difference made typical sibling play challenging, Grace embraced her role with patience and affection, making me incredibly grateful for our union. One evening, while watching TV, Allison asked about Cabbage Patch, referencing a nickname given by Grace due to Allison's bob haircut, which resembled the doll's. While Charles and I laughed at the cute comparison, it embarrassed Allison, leading her to grow out her hair. However, this seemingly innocuous choice had unforeseen consequences. Grace's friend commented on how beautiful Allison's long, straight hair was, contrasting it with Grace's curly hair. This remark hit Grace hard, especially as she navigated the tricky waters of adolescence and school where her peers occasionally mocked her natural curls. This led to a growing rift between the sisters as Grace began to distance herself from Allison, whose straight hair had inadvertently become a source of insecurity for her. Navigating these complex family dynamics, I was reminded of the delicate balance required in blending a family, understanding each member's unique feelings and perspectives, and fostering a supportive environment for all. A year after the four of us began living together, a chaotic scene unfolded just as I returned home from shopping. As I opened the door, Eva's loud cries echoed through the house, driving me straight to the living room. Allison, her hair unevenly chopped with a patch bald as if cut from the roots, ran up to me and clung to me, crying, "Mom, Grace did this." In a mix of shock and anger, I stormed up to Grace's room and banged on her door, demanding an explanation. I couldn't understand why Grace, a middle schooler who clearly knew right from wrong, would harm her sister like this. When my husband came home and saw Eva's hair, his immediate reaction was fury. He dragged Grace out and slapped her before she could even explain. Although his reaction was extreme, the situation was dire. Once we all calmed down and listened to Grace's side, our frustration turned to sadness. Grace had been struggling at school, and this act was a cry for attention and help. We tried to mend things by talking to the school and comforting Grace, but the damage was deep. Grace withdrew to her room, interacting with us only during meals and refused to spend time with Allison or go out as a family. As parents, we reflected on our reactions and realized we could have approached the situation with more understanding. My husband regretted his harsh actions deeply. As a family, we had always struggled with handling difficult emotions, and now it seemed we had all reached a breaking point. When it was time for high school, Grace decided to move in with her grandparents. This distance seemed to help her find some peace, and over time, our relationship with her slowly began to heal. However, she didn't move back home until after she graduated college. Years later, after Grace had married and moved away, and Allison had started job hunting, my father-in-law passed away. This led us to live with my mother-in-law in an old, needing repair house. Initially, I thought we had a good relationship, but living together brought out tensions. My mother-in-law's constant complaints and nagging revealed long-held resentments, and managing day-to-day life became a challenge. I adopted a proactive attitude, deciding to take charge rather than dwell on the stress. "It'll work out somehow," became my motto, a trait that Allison seemed to have inherited, observing it all with a bemused smile. 4 years into this new living arrangement, Grace returned home after her divorce, which came about due to her partner's infidelity. Though she received a significant alimony, she felt the sting of loneliness. "Is it okay if I come back to my house?" she asked, seeking solace in her family home. We welcomed her back, and our family dynamic shifted again. As Grace reintegrated into the household, alliances formed between her and my mother-in-law, and it wasn't long before Eva and I felt sidelined, treated more like housekeepers than family members. My husband, while trying to support Grace, often left Eva and me feeling isolated. Through all these ups and downs, our household dynamics continued to evolve, with each member carrying their own hurts and hopes. It became clear that living together as a family meant navigating a complex web of relationships and emotions, striving for harmony while dealing with the challenges that come with it. After Grace's divorce, my husband made it clear he wanted to support her wholeheartedly. While I understood his intentions, the dynamics at home were becoming increasingly strained, and I wasn't sure how to address the growing tension. During this challenging time, I received a distressing call from my parents' home. My father had suffered a severe health setback and was hospitalized for 3 months. Hearing my mother's weary voice stirred a strong desire in me to be by their side. However, the thought of leaving Alison at home with my mother-in-law and Grace, who were less involved in household responsibilities, made me hesitant. It was Alison who reassured me, urging, "You should go, Mom. If something happens and you're not there, you'll regret it." Her words gave me the strength to make the journey back to my parents, initially intended for 3 months. As my father recovered and was discharged, my mother's health unfortunately began to decline, prompting me to extend my stay. During this period, I stayed in touch with my husband through emails and frequently spoke with Alison over the phone. It became apparent that Alison had taken on much of the household duties. I expressed my concerns to my husband, but he reassured me that Alison was managing willingly, not out of obligation. Despite his assurances, a nagging doubt about the situation at home began to grow within me, fearing that things might soon reach a breaking point. Just as my parents' health started to stabilize, Alison shared some joyful news that lifted my spirits. She was engaged and wanted to introduce her fiancé to me. Eagerly, I planned my return, coordinating with her to ensure I'd be back for the introduction. My parents, too, seemed rejuvenated by the news. However, just as I was preparing to leave, my husband called with an unexpected update. Alison's fiancé's visit had been postponed by a week. He mentioned that Alison was preoccupied and had asked him to relay this message, advising me to stay put for a little longer. His suggestion, coupled with a hastily planned trip on his part that coincided with the new date of the fiancé's visit, raised my suspicions. Despite his reassurances to take it easy, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Determined to understand the situation firsthand, I decided to return home unexpectedly on the day they left for their trip. When I arrived, the house was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the vibrant home I remembered. A faint hissing sound drew my attention as I called out, "I'm back," with no response. After leaving my luggage at the door, I moved cautiously through the unlit house, feeling an increasing sense of unease. My worry turned to alarm when I received no reply after knocking on my mother-in-law's door. Guided by the sound, I approached the bathroom. With a deep breath, I opened the door to a dark, silent scene. Flipping the switch, I was met with a sight that took my breath away. Alison was there, but she was not the same. The scene before me was one I had never expected, prompting an involuntary scream as I stepped into the room, my heart racing with a mix of fear and confusion. After a prolonged absence, when I stepped back into our house, it was nothing like the home I remembered. I was greeted not by warmth, but by silence, and the disheartening sight of Alison, distraught and alone, in a dark bathroom. Her once long, cherished hair lay in uneven clumps around her, with some patches shaved to the scalp, and her clothes clung to her wet, slim frame. Alison, sitting despondently by the bathtub surrounded by a hissing shower head and a cleaning brush, barely acknowledged my presence until I turned off the water and approached her. "Alison, are you okay? What happened?" I asked, my voice a mixture of worry and anger. She looked up slowly, recognition flickering in her eyes, and then, as reality set in, she burst into tears. Holding her, I felt her body shake with sobs. As we embraced, Alison began to recount the harrowing events, how Grace and my husband had conspired against her. She had been cleaning the bathroom when suddenly, my husband restrained her from behind, allowing Grace to cruelly cut and shave her hair. Alison believed it was an attempt to force her to break off her engagement, as my husband had ominously instructed her to end her upcoming marriage before they returned from their trip. Anger surged through me as I called my husband, who nonchalantly confirmed they were at the airport, about to embark on a leisurely holiday in Hokkaido. His calm demeanor, in contrast to the chaos he'd left behind, was chilling. "We are heading off for a fun family trip," he said, as if our daughter's anguish was a mere afterthought. His casual dismissal of the situation stopped me in my tracks. I had intended to confront him, but his tone made me realize he was far removed from the gravity of his actions. In that moment, I felt the bonds of love and trust that had tethered me to my husband disintegrate. Alison, still clinging to me, managed to stand, and together we walked to the small Buddhist altar in the living room. The doors were closed, the photographs of my late husband, Alison's father, were hidden away, a clear sign of my husband's disregard for the past and the memories we cherished. With resolve, I opened the altar, touched the portrait of Alison's father, and swore to protect her and stand against those who harmed her. 3 days later, my husband's frantic calls began. He couldn't enter the house, he couldn't find Alison, and to his shock, he discovered the house was listed for sale. When he finally reached me, his voice was tinged with panic. "Sophia, why is the house sold? What's going on?" Calmly, I confronted him. "Why? Think about what you've done. Reflect on your actions," I said. His attempts to explain were cut short. "No excuses can justify what you did to Alison. I can't forgive you," I declared. Ending the call, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Although drastic, selling the house was a step towards severing the ties with a past that had allowed such harm to come to my daughter. It was a declaration that I would no longer tolerate their cruelty and a promise to protect Alison, no matter what it took. The following day, Alison and I visited my in-laws, finding their Japanese-style room next to the entrance filled with the cardboard boxes that had been shipped earlier. At the doorway, Alison removed her wig and knit cap, revealing the harsh reality of her shorn and patchy hair to my husband, who couldn't bring himself to meet her eyes. He attempted an apology, his voice barely above a whisper, but it was clear neither Alison nor I were in a mood to accept it. Once we settled at home, all 5 of us gathered around a table in the same room. The tension was palpable. Grace, pointing at Alison's head, let out a laugh and hugged her stomach in mockery. "What a terrible head," she jeered, adding, "You can't possibly get married looking like that. Has your fiancé seen you yet? Has the engagement been broken off?" Her laughter filled the room, and my temper flared. "Why did you do this, Grace? Were you jealous of Alison's beautiful hair?" I confronted her, voice raised. Grace stopped laughing and shot back defiantly, "That's right. She grew it out to show off, knowing I struggle with my hair. She was provoking me." Her justification sounded absurd to Alison, who retorted, "That's nonsense. I was just growing my hair because my boyfriend liked it. I don't have time to provoke you." Grace's face turned red with anger. "All men prefer straight hair. The woman my father cheated with had long straight hair like yours. That's why I was angry. You wouldn't understand. How do you know how I feel being shaved bald?" Alison shot back, her voice cold. "If being angry justifies cutting someone's hair, is this okay?" she asked, holding up the clippers from my bag. As Alison made a move towards Grace, who was now visibly frightened, clutching at her curly locks, the atmosphere shifted drastically. Grace collapsed to the floor, sobbing, "I'm sorry. I was miserable after my divorce. I couldn't stand seeing Alison happy." Beside her, my husband also knelt, apologizing for his previous actions and for unjustly taking Grace's side out of guilt for his past mistakes. Before I could respond, my mother-in-law interjected, "Alison isn't really part of our family, so it's different. Sophia is Charles's wife, but Alison is from another man. I still haven't forgiven her for how she affected Grace back in junior high." Her words revealed a deep-seated bias and resentment that had influenced her harsh treatment towards me and Alison. "Yes, we both regret what happened," I started, "but Grace wasn't the only one hurt. Alison suffered too when her hair was cut, yet you only seem to feel sorry for Grace." The room fell silent, the power dynamics between Grace and Alison from those days starkly apparent again. My mother-in-law had nothing more to say, realizing perhaps the imbalance she had fostered. Breaking the heavy silence, my husband started, his voice shaky. "It's been hard for me, seeing Frances grow up to look just like her father. I was jealous, afraid you'd think of him instead of seeing me." This confession shed light on the insecurity that my mother-in-law had exploited, attempting to sow division within our family. I looked at my husband, tears now freely flowing down his face, and reminded him of his vow to love me with all my memories, inclusive of those with Alison's father. The room, filled with tension and past grievances, seemed to pause as we all confronted the deep-seated issues that had brought us to this point. The journey to healing was going to be long and fraught, but it was clear that open, honest conversations were the first step towards mending the fractures within our family. With a resolute gesture, I extended a document towards my husband. "I want a divorce," I declared, my voice unwavering. My husband's eyes widened in disbelief. "This can't be happening," he stammered, but I was firm, my decision irrevocable. "I've thought this through," I continued. "And I've discussed this with Alison's fiancé, given the circumstances. He agrees that it's best if you don't attend the wedding." As Alison clutched my arm, a clear sign she was ready to leave this place of bitterness, my mother-in-law sprang to her feet, her voice tinged with panic. "Wait. What about the house? This one is old, and I can't stay here." Her question about the house I had sold without consulting Charles brought a fresh wave of tension. "That house was left to me by Alison's father, and it is legally in my name," I responded coolly, locking eyes with her. "You wouldn't want to live in a house built by someone you never respected, right?" Her response was a tremble of her lips. She sat down, silenced by the truth. As Alison and I headed for the door, she paused and turned to address my husband and Grace sternly. "This isn't over. I've spoken to the police." The room froze. "That day, we talked to the police," I explained, as the gravity of her words sank in. "The officer had advised us to consider carefully due to the familial ties, but my resolve had only hardened. I am going to file a police report against both Grace and her father," Alison declared, her voice cold and determined. My husband pleaded, desperation coloring his tone. "Please, don't involve the police. We are family. Think about your wedding. You don't want to be the daughter of a criminal." I felt a surge of indignation at his plea. "Family?" I scoffed. "You and Grace have shattered that notion by your actions. It's you who've made Alison the daughter of a criminal, not her decision to seek justice." Seeing him so shaken and desperate, as if clinging to the last strands of hope, did little to sway my resolve. "If you truly cared about us, you'd respect my decision. Let's end this marriage cleanly and ensure that the financial matters, including the insurance money left by Alison's father, are settled fairly." Leaving the house, the stale air of the lingering disputes behind us, Alison and I stepped into the fresh air outside, a symbolic gesture of moving on from the toxicity that had clouded our lives. We shared a look of mutual relief and understanding before heading to the police station. There, we formalized our complaints, and in due course, my husband and Grace were charged and fined. While they avoided jail time, the stain of a criminal record was an indelible mark on their actions. Alison and I, now free from the oppressive atmosphere of deceit and manipulation, could finally look forward to rebuilding our lives on our own terms, strengthened by the trials we had overcome together. After my husband was dismissed from his job due to his criminal record, and with retirement just around the corner, our family's circumstances took a steep downturn. Their house, falling into disrepair, required urgent renovations they could no longer afford. Meanwhile, Alison and I moved into a modest two-bedroom apartment, which was more manageable financially. Despite these upheavals, Alison's wedding plans remained on track, scheduled for 7 months ahead. In an unexpected gesture, my ex-husband reached out, offering to fund Alison's wedding as a form of reparation. However, knowing their strained finances, especially after the fines, Alison and I declined his offer. We didn't want her special day to be overshadowed by the burden of his debts. Some time later, I received a heartfelt letter from Grace. It was an apology, reflecting a profound realization of her long-held obsession with her hair, a source of deep-seated envy that had poisoned her against Alison. Reading her words, I couldn't help but feel a wave of sadness for the pain her insecurities had caused. I hope that this acknowledgement was the first step toward Grace healing and finding peace within herself. Allison, embracing her new beginning, dyed her hair a vibrant milk tea shade that beautifully complemented her fair complexion. She proved that being a bride isn't about conforming to traditional expectations about hair length or style, it's about feeling confident and true to oneself. As Allison prepared to start her new life, I made plans for the future as well. Once she moved out, I intended to return to my parents' home. Having completed my duties as her mother, it felt right to give back to my parents, taking care of them as they once did for me. Sitting together in our apartment, Allison and I shared a laugh, reflecting on the trials we had overcome. "It'll all work out," we reassured each other, ready to begin this new chapter with optimism and resilience. With Allison by my side, I felt a renewed strength to face whatever challenges might come. Our journey had been full of turmoil, yet it had brought us to a place of clarity and empowerment. As we stood on the brink of new beginnings, we knew that love and perseverance were our greatest allies. With smiles and determination, we were prepared to step boldly into the future, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. Thank you for following our story. How did it resonate with you? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this one. Your feedback and support are greatly appreciated.